Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Republic by Plato. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Plato's The Republic, written in the 4th century BCE, stands as one of the most influential works in Western philosophy. A dialogue set in the form of a conversation between Socrates and various other figures, it explores the nature of justice, the ideal society, and the pursuit of truth. But more than a mere examination of political theory, the Republic delves deep into human nature, ethics, and the question of what it means to live a good life. The text begins with a simple question: what is justice? What unfolds is a profound exploration of this concept, one that challenges conventional ideas about morality and governance. Plato uses the character of Socrates to guide the conversation through complex ideas, often leading to questions that are still debated by philosophers and political theorists today. Perhaps most famous for introducing the concept of the philosopher-king, the Republic sets forth an ideal city-state where rulers, having mastered both wisdom and virtue, lead in pursuit of the common good. Along the way, it offers deep insights into the human soul, the role of education in forming just individuals, and the relationship between knowledge and power. While the Republic has been lauded for its visionary proposals, it has also sparked controversy throughout history. Its suggestion that philosophers should rule the state, its rigid class structure, and its somewhat utopian ideals have made it the subject of both admiration and criticism. Despite these debates, Plato's dialogue remains foundational, influencing political philosophy, educational theory, and even the way we think about human nature. In this summary, we will explore the key themes and ideas of the Republic, breaking down its complex arguments and reflecting on its relevance today. By diving into the dialogue's intricate discussion of justice, governance, and the soul, we'll uncover how Plato's vision continues to shape the way we view the world around us. The dialogue opens in the house of Cephalus, an elderly and wealthy Athenian, as Socrates visits him along with his companions Polemarchus and Thrasymachus. Cephalus, enjoying his retirement, welcomes Socrates and engages him in a conversation about the nature of old age and wealth. Socrates, as always, takes the opportunity to dive deeper into matters of ethics and morality. The first question Socrates asks is a simple one, yet it will serve as the foundation for the entire conversation that follows. What is justice? Cephalus, who represents an older generation, offers a conventional answer. He believes that justice is telling the truth and paying one's debts. He provides an example from his own life, explaining that he avoids doing anything unjust by repaying his debts and being honest with others. However, Socrates quickly challenges this definition, suggesting that there are situations where returning a debt could be unjust. For instance, if a friend were to lend you a weapon when they were mad, and later asked for it back while in a state of anger, returning the weapon would only lead to harm. In this way, Socrates demonstrates that justice cannot be defined simply as truth-telling or debt repayment. It requires more nuance and consideration of the consequences. Cephalus, while admitting that Socrates has raised a valid point, chooses to step back from the conversation. leaving the discussion to his son Polemarchus, who steps in as the new interlocutor. Polemarchus offers a definition of justice that is more in line with traditional Athenian values. He argues that justice consists of giving each person their due, helping friends and harming enemies. At first glance, this definition seems reasonable, but Socrates begins to deconstruct it in his usual methodical fashion. He asks whether it is just to harm one's enemies, pointing out that the aim of justice is not to make people worse or more unjust, but to make them better. If harming an enemy would make them worse, then it would contradict the very purpose of justice, which is to improve individuals. Polemarchus, after further questioning, concedes that justice is not about harming anyone, not even enemies. At this point in the dialogue, Socrates turns to a more complex interpretation of justice, which is offered by Thrasymachus, a sophist known for his controversial views. Thrasymachus has been listening to the conversation from the sidelines, and he can no longer contain himself. He challenges the whole premise of the discussion, claiming that justice is nothing more than the advantage of the stronger. According to Thrasymachus, rulers make laws that serve their own interests, and justice is merely obedience to these laws. He argues that the rulers, or tyrants, use their power to impose what they call justice on the people, and those who obey these laws are simply acting in a way that benefits the rulers. In this sense, Thrasymachus believes that justice is a construct created by the powerful to maintain control over the weaker classes. Socrates, as always, does not immediately accept Thrasymachus's assertion. Instead, he engages with Thrasymachus in a dialectical process, probing his argument and trying to uncover the flaws in his reasoning. Socrates begins by questioning the idea that rulers always act in their own best interest. He notes that rulers, like doctors or other experts, are supposed to act with knowledge and in accordance with what is best for their subjects. He gives the example of a doctor who administers medicine to a patient. A doctor does not act in their own self-interest when they prescribe a treatment, but in the interest of the patient's health. Socrates argues that if rulers truly know what is best for the people, then their actions should be aimed at benefiting the whole society, rather than serving their own interests. This leads Socrates to conclude that justice cannot simply be a tool of the powerful, as Thrasymachus suggests. The conversation then shifts to the idea of the ideal city-state. Socrates proposes that, in order to better understand justice, they should imagine a city built from the ground up, one in which justice could be observed clearly and in its most perfect form. This city, Socrates argues, should be based on the principle of specialization. Each person in the city should do the work that they are best suited for, and this division of labor will ensure harmony and efficiency. The ideal city would be divided into 3 distinct classes: the rulers, the auxiliaries, soldiers, and defenders, and the producers, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants. Socrates insists that justice in the city will be achieved when each class performs its role and does not interfere with the roles of the others. The discussion of the ideal city leads to the introduction of the concept of the philosopher-king, the ruler who possesses both wisdom and virtue. Socrates argues that only those who have knowledge of the forms, particularly the form of the good, are fit to rule. The philosopher-king, unlike the tyrant or the oligarch, does not seek power for personal gain. Instead, they rule for the benefit of the whole city, guiding it toward justice and virtue. For Socrates, this is not a mere theoretical ideal. It is a practical solution to the problems of political life. He believes that those who are trained in philosophy are uniquely suited to govern because they understand the deeper truths of existence and can see beyond the deceptive appearances of the material world. In this initial part of the dialogue, Plato sets the stage for the more detailed exploration of justice, the soul, and the ideal city that will follow in later sections of the Republic. The conversation between Socrates, Cephalus, Polemarchus, and Thrasymachus introduces several key themes that will shape the rest of the dialogue. Justice, as defined by Socrates, is not merely obedience to laws or the will of the stronger, but a deeper, more virtuous state of being that requires individuals to act in harmony with their own nature and in accordance with the common good. This vision of justice extends beyond the individual to the structure of society itself, where each person plays their part in creating a just and well-ordered whole. Socrates' idea of the philosopher-king is a radical departure from the traditional understanding of political power, challenging the notion that rulers should be motivated by personal gain or ambition. Instead, Plato's ideal city-state is governed by those who have transcended the limitations of the material world and are guided by reason and wisdom. This, for Plato, is the only way to achieve true justice, both in the individual and in the state. As the dialogue progresses, the characters will continue to explore the nature of the soul, the role of education, and the various forms of government. But in this opening section, Plato introduces the foundational concepts that will drive the entire work, offering a vision of justice that is both radical and enduring. With the conversation about the nature of justice and the ideal city-state underway, Socrates deepens the discussion by turning his attention to the structure and organization of the city itself. The idea of justice in the city, he argues, mirrors the justice in the individual, just as a person's soul is divided into different parts. So too is the city divided into different classes. The key to achieving justice, both in the individual and in the city, is ensuring that each part performs its appropriate function and does not interfere with the functions of the others. Socrates begins by describing the ideal city as a place built on the principle of specialization. Each person must do the work for which they are best suited. In order to create a just society, it's essential to divide the city into three distinct classes: the rulers, the auxiliaries, and the producers. This division of labor is not arbitrary, but reflects the natural abilities of individuals. The rulers are those who possess wisdom and knowledge, making them fit to govern. The auxiliaries are the warriors and defenders of the city, who are courageous and loyal, ensuring that the city remains secure and stable. Finally, the producers, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants are those whose role it is to provide for the material needs of the city, producing food, clothing, and other goods. For Socrates, justice in the city is achieved when each of these classes performs its role without interference. The rulers govern with wisdom, the auxiliaries defend with courage, and the producers work to support the needs of society. Each class, then, has its own distinct virtue. The rulers possess wisdom, the auxiliaries possess courage, and the producers possess moderation. as they are the ones who work to satisfy their needs in a balanced way. This structure ensures that the city functions harmoniously, and no one class dominates or disrupts the others. Just as an individual's soul is most just when reason rules over spirit and appetite, the city is most just when the rulers, representing reason, lead the other classes in the pursuit of the common good. At this point in the dialogue, Socrates introduces the concept of the philosopher-king. In order for the city to be just, Socrates argues, the rulers must be philosopher-kings, wise individuals who have a deep understanding of the forms, particularly the form of the good. The philosopher-king is not someone who seeks power for personal gain or who rules through force or deceit. Instead, the philosopher-king rules because they have the knowledge and wisdom necessary to understand the true nature of reality and to guide the city toward justice. For Plato, the philosopher-king represents the ideal ruler, someone who does not merely govern through power, but who governs through knowledge and virtue. The discussion then turns to the education of these philosopher-kings. In order to prepare them to rule, Socrates outlines an extensive program of education that begins in childhood and continues into adulthood. The education of the philosopher-kings is designed to cultivate their intellectual and moral virtues, training them to understand the true nature of justice, goodness, and truth. This educational process is rigorous and demanding, involving both physical and intellectual training. The young rulers must be taught to excel in both the mind and the body, learning subjects such as mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, while also developing physical strength and discipline. Socrates emphasizes that education should not only focus on the intellectual development of the rulers, but also on their character. The philosopher-king must be a person of virtue, someone who is not motivated by personal desires or selfish ambitions. Only by cultivating the right character can they be trusted to govern justly. The education of the rulers is intended to ensure that they are not only knowledgeable, but also morally virtuous, so that they can make decisions that are in the best interest of the city as a whole. One of the most controversial aspects of Socrates' vision of the ideal city is the notion of the noble lie. In order to maintain harmony and order within the city, Socrates suggests that the rulers must tell a myth, a noble lie, to the citizens. This myth will serve as a unifying story, explaining the structure of the city and the roles of each class. The noble lie asserts that the citizens of the city are all born from the earth, and that their souls are made of different metals, gold, silver, or bronze. Those who are born with gold are destined to be rulers, those with silver to be auxiliaries, and those with bronze to be producers. By telling this myth, Socrates argues, the rulers will encourage the citizens to accept their roles in society and work toward the common good. Though the idea of the noble lie may seem deceptive or manipulative, Socrates justifies it by arguing that it is necessary for the greater good of the city. Without this myth, he believes that the citizens would be more likely to challenge the social order and disrupt the harmony of the city. The noble lie is, therefore, a tool to maintain unity and prevent social unrest, ensuring that each citizen accepts their place in society and works for the common good. In addition to discussing the education of the rulers and the noble lie, Socrates also addresses the importance of the family structure in ideal city. In order to prevent any personal attachments that could interfere with their duty to the city, Socrates proposes a radical solution: the abolition of the traditional family structure. In the ideal city, the rulers and auxiliaries would not have private families. Instead, children would be raised collectively, with the aim of ensuring that the rulers are not influenced by personal affection or loyalty to their own families. This, Socrates believes, would help to create a more just and unified society, as it would eliminate the potential for conflicts of interest that arise from family bonds. Socrates acknowledges that this proposal is extreme, but he argues that it is necessary in order to achieve the ideal city. The rulers must be completely dedicated to the common good and not be swayed by personal ties. By abolishing private families and raising children collectively, Socrates believes that the rulers will be better able to serve the needs of the city as a whole, without the distractions of personal attachments. The discussion of the ideal city in this section sets the stage for the deeper exploration of justice that will follow in the dialogue. Through the creation of the city, Socrates seeks to show how justice is not only a matter of individual behavior, but is also a product of the structure and organization of society. The ideal city, in which each class performs its proper function, serves as a model for understanding justice in the individual, where each part of the soul plays its appropriate role. Socrates' vision of the philosopher-king, the noble lie, and the communal family structure all point to a society where the common good is placed above individual desires, and where rulers, guided by wisdom and virtue, lead the people toward justice. As the dialogue progresses, Socrates will continue to challenge the assumptions of his interlocutors, examining what it means to live a just life, and how the nature of justice can be applied to both individuals and communities. This exploration of justice in the city is only the beginning of a much larger philosophical investigation into the nature of the soul, knowledge, and the ideal society. As Socrates continues to elaborate on the ideal city, he turns his attention to the education of the guardians, the rulers and warriors who will protect and govern the city. He argues that the guardians' education must be tailored to their specific roles, training them in both physical prowess and intellectual wisdom. But more than just physical training or academic learning, Socrates believes the guardians must also undergo moral and emotional education. Their ability to understand and embody the virtues of wisdom, courage, and temperance is paramount, as these qualities will ensure that they govern with justice and act as protectors of the city's stability. For Socrates, the first step in the education of the guardians is the shaping of their characters. He proposes that the young guardians be exposed to the right kind of stories and literature. In this ideal city, only tales that promote virtue and the values of the city should be allowed, while any stories that glorify vice, deception, or moral corruption should be banned. Socrates is adamant that literature and the arts must serve the purpose of moral education. Stories should teach the guardians about courage, wisdom, and moderation, presenting heroes who exemplify these virtues and avoiding depictions of immoral behavior, which might influence the guardians to imitate such actions. Socrates believes that the young guardians must be taught to be sensitive to the emotional content of stories, learning to distinguish between what is truly noble and what is destructive. He argues that the stories we tell, particularly those that children are exposed to, play a crucial role in shaping their character. If a guardian is to possess the courage to defend the city and the wisdom to rule justly, they must be trained from an early age to recognize and internalize the values that uphold the city's ideals. This concept of education through stories and myth is central to Socrates' vision for the guardians, as it helps to form their moral compass. Beyond literature and storytelling, the guardian's education extends to physical training. Socrates is clear that the guardians must be both physically strong and intellectually sharp. Physical training will ensure that they are fit to defend the city, while intellectual training will enable them to rule with wisdom. Both aspects of their education are designed to cultivate the qualities needed to perform their roles in the city effectively. The guardian's education is thus both holistic and rigorous, ensuring they are equipped to carry out the duties entrusted to them by the city. But the education of the guardians is not merely about acquiring knowledge or physical strength. Socrates also stresses the importance of cultivating the right kind of soul. The guardians must learn to love wisdom above all else, to seek truth rather than personal gain, and to prioritize the well-being of the city over their own desires. This moral education, which focuses on cultivating virtues like self-control, justice, and temperance, ensures that the guardians are not only capable in their duties, but also possess the inner moral strength to govern justly. One of the most significant ideas introduced by Socrates in this part of the dialogue is the distinction between the philosopher-king and the average ruler. The philosopher-king, who has undergone the rigorous education and training that Socrates advocates, is uniquely qualified to rule because they understand the nature of the forms, especially the form of the good. While most rulers may seek power for selfish reasons or govern based on personal biases, the philosopher-king rules for the benefit of the whole city, guided by wisdom and virtue. Socrates makes it clear that the philosopher-king is not someone who seeks power for its own sake, but someone who recognizes that their wisdom and knowledge are necessary for the city's proper functioning. Socrates explains that the philosopher-king's education involves not only practical knowledge of politics and governance, but also an understanding of the eternal and unchanging truths that govern the universe. The philosopher-king is someone who has ascended through the levels of knowledge, from the sensory world of appearances to the higher realm of the forms, and finally to the form of the good, which represents the highest truth and the ultimate source of all that is just and beautiful. The philosopher-king's ability to contemplate and understand these higher truths equips them to govern justly and wisely, ensuring that they make decisions based on what is best for the city, rather than what is personally advantageous. In Socrates' view, the philosopher-king is the ideal ruler because they are not swayed by the temptations of power or wealth. Unlike the typical ruler, who may be driven by personal ambition or a desire to maintain their own position, the philosopher-king understands that true happiness comes not from material possessions or power, but from knowledge, virtue, and the pursuit of the good. This detachment from personal desires makes the philosopher-king the ideal candidate to lead a just city, as they will make decisions that are guided solely by reason and a desire to benefit the city as a whole. As the conversation continues, Socrates expands on the idea of justice in the city and in the individual. He argues that justice is achieved when each part of the city, each class of citizens, performs its proper function and does not interfere with the functions of the others. The same holds true for the individual. Justice occurs when the three parts of the soul, the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive, work in harmony, with reason ruling over the other two parts. This notion of justice is closely tied to Socrates' broader philosophical beliefs about the nature of the soul and the importance of wisdom in achieving a good and meaningful life. At this point, Socrates begins to explore the idea of how to cultivate the virtues within the individual. Just as the guardians must be educated in wisdom, courage, and temperance, so too must the individual soul be trained to embody these virtues. The rational part of the soul, which seeks knowledge and truth, must govern the spirited part, which desires honor and achievement, and the appetitive part, which craves bodily pleasures. Justice, Socrates argues, is the harmony that arises when reason controls these other parts of the soul, ensuring that each part performs its proper role. The discussion of justice leads Socrates to examine the different types of individuals and their corresponding types of societies. He categorizes people into three types: the philosopher, the warrior, and the merchant, each corresponding to one of the three classes in the ideal city. The philosopher, who seeks knowledge and wisdom, represents the ruling class. The warrior, who desires honor and courage, represents the auxiliary class. And the merchant, who seeks wealth and pleasure, represents the producing class. Each person, like each class in the city, has a natural inclination toward one of these qualities, and justice is achieved when they perform the function best suited to their nature. Through these discussions, Socrates continues to build his vision of the ideal city-state, one in which justice is achieved by ensuring that each part of the city and each part of the soul performs its proper function. The education of the guardians plays a crucial role in this vision, as it ensures that those who rule and defend the city possess the wisdom, courage, and virtue necessary to maintain a just society. As the dialogue progresses, Socrates will delve deeper into the philosophical implications of justice and the nature of the good life, continuing to challenge conventional ideas and pushing his interlocutors to rethink their understanding of morality, politics, and human nature. As Socrates continues to discuss the ideal city, he transitions into a deeper exploration of the nature of justice, both within the city-state and the individual. Building on his earlier argument that justice arises when each class in the city performs its proper role, he now looks at how these roles are connected to the overall harmony of the soul. For Socrates, justice is not simply an external concept, but something that must resonate within each individual. To begin, Socrates revisits the structure of the ideal city. In the previous discussions, the city was divided into three classes: the rulers, philosopher-kings, the auxiliaries, warriors, and the producers, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Each class has a particular function, and for justice to prevail, each must focus solely on its designated task. The rulers, led by wisdom, are responsible for governance. The auxiliaries, led by courage, are tasked with defending the city. And the producers, motivated by desire for wealth, provide for the city's material needs. Socrates now explores how these divisions of labor mirror the tripartite nature of the individual soul. He argues that just as the city consists of three classes, the human soul consists of three parts: the rational part, which seeks truth and knowledge; the spirited part, which craves honor and emotional strength; and the appetitive part, which seeks physical pleasures and material satisfaction. The structure of the soul reflects the structure of the city, with each part corresponding to one of the three classes. For Socrates, justice occurs in both the city and the individual when each part of the soul or city does what it is naturally suited for. In the city, the rulers rule, the auxiliaries defend, and the producers provide, with each class contributing to the well-being of the whole. Similarly, in the individual, justice is achieved when the rational part of the soul rules over the spirited and appetitive parts. The rational part should guide the soul, ensuring that the desires of the spirited and appetitive parts do not lead the individual astray. This leads to a discussion of the importance of self-mastery and self-control in the pursuit of justice. Socrates suggests that in the ideal city, people should live under a system of education and governance that trains them to control their desires and emotions. Just as the guardians must undergo rigorous training to ensure that their desires do not conflict with their duties, individuals must cultivate the virtues of wisdom, courage, and temperance in order to live a just life. Wisdom, for Socrates, is not simply about knowledge. It is the ability to make good decisions, to understand what is truly valuable, and to prioritize the well-being of the whole city over personal desires. Courage, on the other hand, is not just about physical bravery. It is about maintaining conviction in the face of adversity, particularly in the defense of what is right. This kind of courage, Socrates explains, is essential to the functioning of both the city and the individual. In the city, the auxiliaries must have the courage to protect the state from internal and external threats. For the individual, courage manifests in the ability to resist temptations and to remain steadfast in the pursuit of justice, even when faced with difficult choices. Temperance, the third virtue, is the ability to regulate one's desires and appetites, ensuring that they do not overtake reason and lead to excess. Socrates believes that temperance is key to the harmony of both the city and the soul. In the ideal city, temperance ensures that the rulers do not become corrupted by power, that the warriors do not become overly aggressive, and that the producers do not become consumed by greed. In the individual, temperance manifests as the ability to control one's desires and act in accordance with reason. It is through temperance that one achieves a balanced and harmonious life, avoiding the chaos that comes from unrestrained desires. Socrates moves on to consider the role of women in the ideal city, a topic that was often controversial in ancient Greek society. In the context of the guardians, Socrates asserts that women should receive the same education and training as men, provided they are naturally suited for the role. This radical proposition for the time was based on the idea that there should be no distinctions in education or ability based on gender. Women, like men, possess the capacity for reason, courage, and wisdom, and thus should be equally involved in the governance and defense of the city. The notion of equality between the sexes in the ideal city is one of the most progressive elements of Socrates' vision. He argues that the rulers should select their warriors and rulers based on merit, not gender, and that both men and women should be treated equally in their roles as guardians. This concept challenges the traditional patriarchal structures of Athenian society, where women were often relegated to the private sphere. Socrates' argument for equality reflects his broader commitment to justice and meritocracy, where the ideal city functions not based on arbitrary distinctions, but on the natural abilities and virtues of its citizens. While Socrates' ideas on gender equality were groundbreaking for his time, they were not universally accepted by his contemporaries. Many in Athenian society would have found the notion of women serving as warriors or rulers deeply unsettling. However, Socrates' arguments are rooted in the belief that the city's needs should take precedence over entrenched social norms, and that justice requires people to fulfill roles based on their talents, not their gender. Socrates also introduces the concept of the noble lie, a necessary myth that helps maintain unity and stability within the city. The noble lie is a story that the rulers tell to the citizens, convincing them that they were born from the earth and are therefore naturally suited to their respective roles in society. The lie is designed to prevent conflict between the classes by fostering a sense of unity and purpose. While Socrates acknowledges that this is not a literal truth, he argues that the noble lie serves the greater good by encouraging people to accept their roles and work for the welfare of the city. This idea of the noble lie raises interesting ethical questions. Is it right for rulers to deceive the people for their own benefit? Socrates justifies this deception by asserting that it is a necessary means of ensuring social harmony. The lie, while false, is intended to promote justice and maintain the well-being of the city. For Socrates, the ends justify the means, and if the noble lie serves to create a just and stable society, it is a price worth paying. As Socrates' discussion unfolds, it becomes clear that the vision of the ideal city is not simply a political blueprint, but a philosophical framework for understanding human nature and morality. The ideal city is a reflection of the ideal soul, where reason governs desires and emotions, and each part performs its proper function. Through the cultivation of virtues like wisdom, courage, and temperance, both the individual and the city can achieve harmony and justice. Socrates' exploration of these themes challenges conventional views of morality, politics, and human nature, and sets the stage for the further development of his philosophical ideas. In the coming dialogues, Socrates will continue to deepen the philosophical exploration of justice, ultimately linking the structure of the city to the nature of the soul and the pursuit of the good life. Socrates' discussion about the ideal city continues to evolve as he delves deeper into the nature of justice, the role of philosophy in governance, and the importance of education in shaping both the rulers and the citizens. Having already established the importance of each class fulfilling its specific role, he now turns his attention to the crucial role of the philosopher-king and the education required to produce the rulers best suited for leadership. One of the central ideas in the Republic is the concept of the philosopher-king, a ruler who is not motivated by personal gain or power, but by the pursuit of truth and wisdom. Socrates argues that only those who have a true understanding of justice, knowledge, and virtue are fit to govern. The philosopher-king, because of his wisdom, will have the ability to discern what is truly good for the city and will act not out of self-interest, but for the well-being of all citizens. This idea contrasts sharply with the typical notion of leadership in the city-state, where rulers often rise to power based on wealth, birthright, or popularity rather than wisdom. For Socrates, the philosopher-king is not a mere theoretical concept, but a practical necessity. He argues that democracy, or rule by the many, is inherently flawed because people are often swayed by their desires and passions rather than by reason. A democracy, therefore, is vulnerable to demagogues who manipulate the masses for their own benefit. In contrast, a philosopher-king is able to see beyond the fleeting desires of the people and make decisions based on what is truly just and good. However, Socrates is also acutely aware of the challenges in identifying and educating such a ruler. A philosopher-king cannot simply emerge by chance. He must be someone who has spent years in rigorous training, gaining knowledge in both philosophy and practical governance. The education of the philosopher-king is not only a matter of learning facts or technical skills. It is about cultivating virtues like wisdom, temperance, and courage, as well as fostering an understanding of the forms, which are the highest truths in Platonic philosophy. The study of mathematics, geometry, and dialectics are key to this training, as these disciplines help sharpen the mind and prepare the philosopher to understand the ultimate realities of existence. The process of education for a philosopher-king is long and arduous, beginning in childhood and continuing into adulthood. In this ideal system, the education is designed to foster the development of both the mind and the soul. Young children are taught the basic principles of education, but as they grow older, they are introduced to more complex subjects such as mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. It is through this progression that the philosopher is able to come closer to understanding the true nature of reality, which Socrates equates to the knowledge of the forms. The forms are central to Socrates' conception of knowledge. They are eternal, unchanging ideals that exist beyond the physical world. Everything in the material world is merely a reflection or imitation of these perfect forms. For example, the concept of beauty in the physical world is just a shadow of the true form of beauty. Similarly, the philosopher-king must not be swayed by the opinions of the masses or the physical appearance of things, but must seek the truth that lies beyond mere appearances. To do so, he must train his mind and spirit to perceive the forms directly. This focus on the forms also ties into Socrates' discussion of the allegory of the cave, one of the most famous passages in the Republic. In this allegory, Socrates imagines prisoners who have been chained in a cave for their entire lives, only able to see shadows on the wall. These shadows, cast by objects behind them, are their only reality. If one of the prisoners is freed and exposed to the outside world, he will initially be blinded by the sunlight, but eventually, he will come to understand that the world outside the cave is the true reality. The shadows on the wall represent the world of appearances, while the outside world represents the realm of the forms, where true knowledge resides. The allegory of the cave illustrates the transformative journey that a philosopher must undergo to achieve wisdom. Just as the freed prisoner must adjust to the light of the sun and come to understand the true nature of the world, so too must the philosopher-king overcome his initial ignorance and develop the ability to perceive the deeper truths of existence. This process is difficult and often painful, as it requires the individual to confront the limitations of his senses and intellect, and to question everything he has known up until that point. But for Socrates, this is the path to true knowledge and ultimately to justice. Education, then, is not simply a means to acquire technical skills or vocational knowledge, but a moral and philosophical undertaking that shapes the entire person. The philosopher-king's education must be a holistic process, one that engages both the intellect and the soul. It is through this education that the philosopher develops the virtues necessary to rule justly, wisdom, courage, and temperance, and to lead the city in accordance with the ideals of justice. In addition to the importance of education, Socrates also discusses the nature of the soul and its relation to the city-state. He argues that the soul, like the city, is made up of three parts: the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive. Justice occurs when each part of the soul performs its proper function, just as in the city, where each class performs its designated role. The rational part of the soul must rule over the other parts, and the spirited part must assist the rational in this task. The appetitive part, which is concerned with desires and pleasures, must be subordinated to the rational and spirited parts in order to maintain harmony and balance. The soul of the philosopher-king, then, must be in harmony, with the rational part ruling over the spirited and appetitive parts. It is through this inner harmony that the philosopher-king is able to act justly, both in his own life and in his role as ruler of the city. The education and cultivation of the soul are inseparable from the education and cultivation of the mind. The philosopher-king's wisdom, gained through his knowledge of the forms and his understanding of the nature of justice, allows him to lead the city with clarity and integrity, seeking what is best for all, not just for himself. Socrates acknowledges that the philosopher-king is an ideal, and in practice, it may be difficult to find individuals who are truly suited for such a role. However, he argues that the ideal city is a model to strive for, one that provides a framework for understanding how justice functions, both within the individual and the society. Through the education of the philosopher-king and the structure of the city as a whole, Socrates offers a vision of a society in which justice prevails, and each individual is able to fulfill their potential. As the dialogue progresses, Socrates will continue to refine his arguments about the nature of justice and the structure of the ideal city. But even in this section, he begins to outline a profound and transformative vision of human life and governance, one where wisdom, virtue, and education are the cornerstones of a just society. As the dialogue unfolds, Socrates deepens his exploration of the qualities necessary for the ideal rulers, the philosopher-kings. This section sees a continued focus on how the nature of the soul directly influences the structure of the ideal city. Socrates discusses how justice within the city can only be achieved when those in power are true philosophers, individuals who not only love wisdom, but also possess the qualities needed to rule justly. Socrates emphasizes that true philosophers are not merely scholars or intellectuals. They are individuals whose lives are dedicated to the pursuit of truth. Unlike politicians or rulers, who might be driven by the desires for power, wealth, or honor, philosophers seek knowledge for its own sake, understanding that wisdom leads to virtuous living. They are uniquely suited to rule because they possess the knowledge of the forms, the eternal, unchanging truths that govern the world. The philosopher-king, according to Socrates, must have knowledge of the form of the good, a concept that becomes one of the most significant aspects of Platonic thought. This form represents the highest level of understanding and is the source of all other forms, providing the foundation for all truths. Without knowledge of the good, any ruler, no matter how well-meaning, is bound to be misguided in their decision-making. The philosopher, however, has access to the form of the good, allowing them to make decisions that are in harmony with the ultimate truth, and therefore, in the best interest of the people. Socrates describes the philosopher-king as someone who is not only intellectually gifted, but also morally virtuous. A philosopher-king must possess both wisdom and virtue, and these qualities must be cultivated through rigorous education. The education of the philosopher-ruler is intensive and spans many years. From childhood, they are trained in both physical and intellectual disciplines, ensuring they develop a balanced character that values wisdom over material gain. Importantly, the philosophers must also undergo a long period of theoretical study in philosophy, mathematics, and dialectic, with the ultimate goal of understanding the forms and achieving knowledge of the good. The process of education for the philosopher-king is demanding. It requires not only intellectual aptitude, but also emotional fortitude, as rulers must be able to resist the temptations of power and wealth. This is why Socrates insists that the rulers of the ideal city must be individuals who are inherently virtuous, individuals who have been tested and proven in their ability to lead with wisdom, moderation, and justice. He argues that only those who have experienced the trials of education and come to understand the nature of the soul and the forms are capable of ruling with true justice. Socrates then turns to a discussion of the noble lie once again, a concept he introduced earlier in the dialogue. The noble lie is a myth crafted by the rulers to ensure harmony and unity in the city. According to this myth, the citizens of the city are told that they were born from the earth and are part of a shared, divine heritage. This myth encourages citizens to accept their roles within the city, whether they are rulers, auxiliaries, or producers. The noble lie serves to prevent jealousy and division between the classes and ensures that each individual fulfills their proper function. While this idea of the noble lie may seem deceptive, Socrates argues that it is necessary for the greater good of the city. In his view, it is not about misleading people for the sake of power, but rather about ensuring that each class within the city remains focused on their specific role, preventing the chaos that could arise if everyone sought to attain the role of ruler or warrior. The noble lie is, therefore, a tool for maintaining social order and harmony, and Socrates defends its necessity in the context of the ideal city. As Socrates continues his discussion, he emphasizes the critical role of education in shaping the individual's soul. He argues that education is not merely about acquiring knowledge, but about developing the virtues that enable individuals to live justly. For the rulers, education must be especially rigorous, as they will ultimately shape the future of the city. Socrates outlines an educational system designed to develop the soul in three key areas: reason, spirit, and appetite. The rational part of the soul is nurtured through intellectual study, the spirited part through courage and honor, and the appetitive part through moderation and self-control. The role of the philosopher-king is to ensure that the city remains true to its ideals, guided by wisdom and justice. However, this responsibility is not an easy one. The philosopher-king must constantly battle the forces of greed, selfishness, and desire, both within their own soul and within the souls of others. In the ideal city, the philosopher-king does not seek personal gain, but works solely for the good of the community. They are guardians of justice, tasked with ensuring that each class fulfills its role and that harmony is maintained throughout the city. Socrates goes on to argue that the philosopher-king is not only the best ruler for the city, but also the most just individual. This argument reinforces his earlier claim that the just soul is the happiest soul. The philosopher-king, by living in accordance with reason and virtue, is the one who achieves the greatest level of happiness, not through material wealth or power, but through the pursuit of wisdom and justice. This reflects one of the central themes of the Republic, the idea that true happiness is found not in external success or pleasure, but in internal harmony, knowledge, and virtue. An important aspect of Socrates' philosophy is that the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of justice are intrinsically linked. For Socrates, the philosopher is not only someone who knows what is true, but someone who acts according to that truth. Justice, for him, is not merely a set of rules or laws, but a way of living that aligns the individual's soul with the highest truths of the world. As a result, the philosopher-king, who has achieved the highest knowledge, is the only one capable of ruling in accordance with justice and achieving true happiness for both themselves and their citizens. Through these arguments, Socrates outlines a vision of the ideal city where each individual fulfills their role according to their nature, where rulers govern with wisdom, and where justice prevails. He presents the philosopher-king as the ultimate ideal, someone who not only understands the nature of justice, but also embodies it, leading the city with knowledge, virtue, and integrity. In this city, the pursuit of wisdom and justice ensures that both the city and the individual flourish, achieving the highest form of well-being and harmony. The final conclusion of this section rests on the belief that philosophy, when practiced properly, can transform individuals and cities alike. It is through philosophy that the philosopher-king is able to rise above the fleeting desires of the body and grasp the eternal truths of the world, using this wisdom to guide others and create a just and harmonious society. By aligning the structure of the city with the structure of the soul, Socrates shows how both personal and societal justice can be achieved, offering a compelling vision of an ideal state that is grounded in philosophy and virtue. As the dialogue progresses, Socrates and his interlocutors continue to explore the nature of justice and the human soul, delving deeper into how the structure of the ideal city reflects the divisions within the individual soul. They now turn to the concept of the soul itself, examining its three distinct parts: reason, spirit, and appetite, and how each part corresponds to the different classes within the city. The analogy Socrates makes between the structure of the soul and the structure of the city is one of the most crucial elements of his argument. In the ideal city, each class has a specific function that mirrors the nature of the soul. The rulers, or philosopher-kings, represent the rational part of the soul. Their job is to govern wisely, using their knowledge of the forms to make decisions that promote justice and harmony. The warriors, or auxiliaries, represent the spirited part of the soul, the part that is responsible for courage, honor, and the defense of the city. The producers, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants represent the appetitive part of the soul, which is concerned with the physical needs of the individual, such as food, shelter, and comfort. Socrates contends that justice in the city, as well as in the soul, occurs when each part performs its proper function without interfering with the others. In other words, a just city is one in which the rulers govern, the warriors protect, and the producers supply the city's material needs. Similarly, a just soul is one in which reason rules over spirit and appetite, with reason guiding the individual toward wisdom and virtue. This harmony is the key to achieving both personal and social well-being. Socrates argues that, just as the soul's parts must be in harmony for an individual to be just, the city must also be ordered in such a way that the different classes function in their respective roles. This requires not only education, but also the proper upbringing and training of each class. The guardians, or rulers, must be educated in philosophy and dialectics to understand the forms and achieve knowledge of the good. The warriors must be trained to act courageously and defend the city with honor. The producers must learn the skills necessary to provide for the material needs of the city and ensure its prosperity. The education system is a crucial part of Socrates' vision for the ideal city. He stresses the importance of early childhood education, as the foundation for a just society is laid in the formative years of a child's life. Children must be taught not only knowledge, but also virtue, as it is through the cultivation of virtue that they will be able to fulfill their roles within the city. The education system must be designed to identify the natural talents of each individual and guide them into the class for which they are best suited. Socrates also addresses the issue of the role of women in the ideal city. In a revolutionary argument for his time, he suggests that women should have the same opportunities as men, especially in the classes of warriors and rulers. Just as there is no natural distinction between men and women in terms of intellectual ability or courage, there should be no distinction in terms of their roles in society. Both men and women in Socrates' ideal city should receive the same education and training, and both should have the opportunity to serve as guardians or philosopher-kings. This is a radical departure from the norms of Athenian society, where women were generally confined to domestic roles and had little influence on public life. This egalitarian vision of society is grounded in Socrates' belief in the inherent equality of the soul. He argues that all souls are fundamentally equal, and that differences in ability arise not from the soul's nature, but from the circumstances in which individuals are born. Education, then, is the key to unlocking each individual's potential. The idea that women could be equal to men in this regard is controversial, but it serves to illustrate Socrates' commitment to justice as a principle that transcends social and gender boundaries. As the conversation moves forward, Socrates shifts his focus to a critical question. How can we know that the philosopher-king is truly just and capable of ruling wisely? How can we be certain that they are not motivated by personal desires, such as power or wealth? Socrates proposes a radical solution to this problem. The philosopher rulers must be trained to live a life of absolute austerity. They must be forbidden from owning private property or accumulating wealth, as these things could corrupt their judgment. Instead, the rulers should live communally, sharing all possessions in common, including their families. This communal living is meant to prevent the philosopher-kings from being distracted by personal interests and desires, ensuring that they remain focused on the greater good of the city. This idea of communal living extends beyond the rulers to include the warriors and even the producers. While the producers are still allowed to own property, they too are encouraged to live simple and modest lives, free from the temptations of luxury and excess. In this way, the city is organized around the principle of harmony, with each class fulfilling its proper function without being distracted by personal desires or material wealth. Socrates' vision of the philosopher-king's lifestyle is a reflection of his broader ethical framework. He believes that the soul's ultimate goal is to achieve harmony, and that this harmony can only be attained through the practice of virtue. For the philosopher-king, this means living a life of temperance and moderation, free from the corrupting influences of wealth and power. By removing these distractions, the rulers are able to focus solely on the pursuit of wisdom and justice, guiding the city toward the highest ideals of truth and goodness. As Socrates' discussion of the philosopher-king continues, he draws upon the famous allegory of the cave to illustrate the nature of knowledge and the philosopher's role in society. In the allegory, prisoners are chained inside a dark cave and can only see shadows projected onto the wall in front of them. These shadows are their entire reality, as they have never seen the world outside the cave. One prisoner is freed and exposed to the light of the sun, experiencing the world outside the cave for the first time. As the prisoner adjusts to the light, they come to realize that the shadows on the wall were mere illusions, and that the true nature of reality lies in the world outside the cave. The allegory is a powerful metaphor for the philosopher's journey from ignorance to knowledge. Just as the freed prisoner must struggle to understand the truth, so too must the philosopher wrestle with the complexities of the forms and the nature of reality. But once they have gained this knowledge, the philosopher is responsible for returning to the cave and sharing their insights with others, guiding them toward the light of truth. This is the philosopher-king's duty, to lead the city out of the darkness of ignorance and into the light of knowledge and justice. In this way, the philosopher-king is not only the ruler of the city, but also its teacher and guide, helping to elevate the souls of the citizens and lead them toward a higher understanding of themselves and the world around them. The philosopher's ultimate goal is to achieve the highest form of knowledge, the knowledge of the good, and to use this wisdom to create a just and harmonious society. By understanding the forms and living in accordance with the principles of justice, the philosopher-king can guide the city toward the ultimate good, ensuring that all citizens, regardless of their class, live virtuous and fulfilled lives. Through these discussions, Socrates' vision for the ideal city takes shape, rooted in the belief that justice can only be achieved when each part of the city and each part of the soul fulfills its proper function. By focusing on education, virtue, and the pursuit of wisdom, Socrates presents an ideal society where harmony and justice prevail, offering a blueprint for how individuals and communities can live in accordance with the highest ideals. As the dialogue continues, Socrates and his interlocutors delve into the nature of justice in the city, exploring how it connects to the lives of individual citizens and their moral and intellectual development. The conversation moves to a significant question: how does one prove the superiority of the just life over the unjust life? Socrates begins to turn his focus toward a more in-depth understanding of justice by examining the consequences of living a just or unjust life, both in the city and the soul. To explore this, Socrates introduces the concept of the reward for justice, emphasizing that true justice is not simply about fulfilling one's role within the city or society, but also about leading an individual toward the highest form of happiness. In contrast to the notion that injustice might offer immediate rewards or advantages, Socrates argues that only the just life leads to genuine fulfillment and well-being. He claims that living justly aligns the soul with the divine order of the universe and brings about a kind of inner harmony that is far superior to any external, material rewards gained from injustice. At this point in the dialogue, the conversation shifts toward the exploration of justice in the individual soul. Socrates highlights that the structure of the city provides a model for understanding how the soul is ordered. Just as the ideal city requires each class to perform its proper function without interfering with the others, so too must the soul's three parts, reason, spirit, and appetite, work in harmony. Reason must rule, spirit must support, and appetite must be restrained. If the parts of the soul are in balance, the individual will experience true happiness and peace. However, when one part of the soul overpowers the others, such as when reason is dominated by appetite or spirit, then the individual falls into a state of inner conflict and disorder, leading to unhappiness and moral corruption. Socrates goes on to illustrate how the just soul and the unjust soul differ in terms of their long-term effects. He likens the unjust soul to a diseased or corrupted body. Just as a body afflicted with illness suffers from internal conflict and weakness, the soul of the unjust person suffers from discord and imbalance. The pursuit of selfish desires, the abandonment of reason, and the failure to live according to virtue all lead to this kind of moral decay. Socrates argues that even if the unjust individual appears to enjoy wealth, power, or status in the short term, these external gains are ultimately hollow. Without internal harmony, the individual cannot experience true fulfillment. Conversely, the just soul experiences the opposite. Even if an individual who lives justly suffers from poverty, hardship, or loss, Socrates argues that they are still closer to the divine order and will experience greater peace of mind than the unjust person. By aligning themselves with reason and living virtuously, they are in harmony with the laws of nature and the universe. Their happiness, therefore, is not dependent on material or external circumstances, but arises from within. This internal peace and stability, Socrates asserts, are the ultimate rewards of justice. The contrast between the just and unjust life forms the foundation for Socrates' argument that justice is inherently superior to injustice. It is at this point that Socrates introduces a pivotal idea, the theory of philosophical happiness. This form of happiness is distinct from the pursuit of pleasure or worldly success, which are fleeting and unreliable. Instead, philosophical happiness arises from the pursuit of wisdom, truth, and virtue. By focusing on the development of the soul and seeking knowledge of the good, individuals can achieve a form of fulfillment that transcends the limitations of time and circumstance. To make his point even clearer, Socrates draws a vivid analogy between the unjust life and the life of a tyrant. A tyrant, according to Socrates, is someone who allows their appetites and desires to rule over them completely. This unchecked pursuit of personal pleasure leads to a life of violence, cruelty, and moral degradation. Though the tyrant may seem powerful and in control, they are, in fact, enslaved by their own desires. They are never at peace, constantly driven by fear, guilt, and a craving for more power and wealth. In this way, the tyrant is the embodiment of the unjust soul, one that is driven by unchecked appetite and lacks the guiding influence of reason. In stark contrast, the philosopher-king, who has attained wisdom and knowledge, exemplifies the just soul. The philosopher-king is not enslaved by desires, but is instead guided by reason and a deep understanding of what is truly good. Their life, Socrates suggests, is one of inner peace and harmony, where external circumstances do not disturb the soul's equilibrium. The philosopher-king's happiness does not arise from material success or personal gain, but from the pursuit of wisdom, virtue, and justice. They rule not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the city, working tirelessly to promote the good and to align the city with the divine order of the universe. At this juncture in the dialogue, the conversation takes a philosophical turn, as Socrates introduces the idea of the philosopher's journey toward knowledge. In this journey, the philosopher moves from the world of appearances, where people are caught up in superficial material concerns, toward the realm of the forms, where true knowledge and understanding reside. This journey is analogous to the allegory of the cave, where the philosopher is freed from the shadows of ignorance and comes into the light of truth. In the context of the ideal city, the philosopher's role is crucial. They are the only ones capable of understanding the forms, the eternal, unchanging truths that govern the universe, and therefore the only ones fit to rule. The philosopher-king is not motivated by personal ambition or desire for power, but by the desire to understand the ultimate truths of existence and to bring the city into alignment with those truths. This is the essence of Socrates' vision for the ideal city, a city that is governed by wisdom, justice, and the pursuit of the highest good. Socrates then reflects on the philosopher's responsibility to share their knowledge with others. The philosopher is not meant to remain in isolation or to enjoy the benefits of wisdom for themselves. Instead, the philosopher must return to the city and lead the citizens toward a deeper understanding of justice, virtue, and the good life. This idea reinforces the central theme of the Republic, that justice is not only about personal fulfillment, but about the well-being of the entire city. A just city is one where all individuals, guided by their ruler's wisdom, live in harmony, and work together to achieve the common good. Ultimately, Socrates concludes that the life of the philosopher is the most just and the most fulfilling. Though the philosopher may face challenges and hardships, they are guided by reason and wisdom, which leads them toward a greater understanding of the truth and a deeper sense of inner peace. This pursuit of wisdom and justice, Socrates argues, is the highest calling, and it is only through this pursuit that individuals and cities can achieve true happiness and well-being. As the dialogue progresses, the question of whether a just life can lead to greater happiness than an unjust one becomes clearer. Socrates' argument rests not just on the immediate rewards of justice, but on the long-term benefits of living in alignment with the eternal principles of truth and virtue. The philosopher, who seeks to understand these principles, lives a life that is richer and more meaningful than that of the unjust person, whose life is driven by the pursuit of fleeting pleasures and personal gain. In the end, it is the philosopher who lives the truest and most just life, and it is they who are best equipped to guide the city toward the good. As the dialogue reaches its final stages, the discussion takes a more profound turn. Socrates now shifts his focus to the question of the philosopher-kings' relationship with the city they govern, and their duty to lead by example. He emphasizes that, though the philosopher-king is wise and virtuous, they are not exempt from the burdens of ruling. Instead, their wisdom and knowledge must be applied to ensure the city's well-being. Socrates' point is clear. Rulers who are truly just are those who are not motivated by personal gain, but by their commitment to the common good. This presents a powerful critique of the conventional understanding of power, which often conflates authority with the pursuit of selfish interests. For Socrates, justice in the individual is mirrored in the just city, and thus the philosopher-king must exhibit selflessness and a dedication to the truth. To rule wisely, the philosopher must understand the nature of reality, the forms, and see beyond the superficial appearances that cloud the judgment of ordinary people. The philosopher-king must be aware of the divine order and the cosmic principles that govern all existence. This knowledge allows them to guide the city with a steady hand, ensuring that it remains just and in harmony with the natural world. The dialogue now shifts toward the idea of the philosopher's education, a key aspect of their preparation to rule. Socrates insists that the process of education for the philosopher must be rigorous and comprehensive. It is not enough for the philosopher-king to have abstract knowledge. They must also possess practical wisdom that allows them to engage with the world and the people they are meant to lead. This education begins with the study of mathematics and the sciences, disciplines that cultivate reasoning and an understanding of the natural world. But this intellectual foundation must be followed by the study of philosophy, which seeks to reveal the eternal truths that govern existence. Socrates also addresses the nature of the philosopher's life. He makes the case that the philosopher, in their pursuit of wisdom, must not be swayed by material pleasures or external rewards. This is a key aspect of the philosopher's moral character, their ability to remain detached from the trappings of wealth, fame, and power. The philosopher-king is not motivated by these fleeting desires. Their happiness comes from the pursuit of knowledge and their service to the greater good of the city. A significant point in this part of the dialogue is the introduction of the philosophical education of the rulers. For Socrates, education is a lifelong pursuit, not something limited to formal schooling, but extending into the realm of lived experience and ethical development. The philosopher's education is not just intellectual, it is also deeply moral and spiritual. In order to cultivate the virtues of wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice within themselves, philosophers must undergo rigorous training in self-discipline, character building, and moral reflection. This education, Socrates asserts, is the only way to ensure that the rulers of the city are truly fit to govern. Without it, rulers would be no different from those driven by selfish ambition and the desire for power, who are likely to fall into tyranny. In contrast, the philosopher-king's training ensures that they rule with wisdom, virtue, and a profound understanding of justice. Their authority is not based on fear, coercion, or the manipulation of others, but on their insight into the deeper truths of the world and their ability to apply this knowledge to the good of the city. At the heart of this philosophical education is the idea that the ruler must have knowledge of the forms, the eternal and unchanging truths that represent the highest reality. Socrates uses the famous allegory of the cave to illustrate this point. In this allegory, prisoners are chained inside a dark cave, only able to see the shadows cast on the wall by objects passing in front of a fire. The prisoners believe these shadows to be the only reality, as they have never seen the true objects themselves. The philosopher, however, escapes from the cave and comes to understand the nature of reality, seeing the objects as they truly are in the light of day. This represents the philosopher's journey from ignorance to knowledge, from the world of appearances to the world of truth. The philosopher's ability to ascend from the shadows of ignorance into the light of truth allows them to govern with wisdom and justice. They understand the nature of the forms and can apply this understanding to make decisions that align with the greater good. The philosopher-king, unlike the ordinary ruler, does not rely on their own limited perspective or personal desires. Instead, they look to the eternal truths of the forms to guide their actions and decisions. Socrates emphasizes that the philosopher's understanding of the forms is not simply theoretical, but has practical implications for their rule. In the city, the philosopher-king is not just an intellectual. They are a moral leader whose understanding of justice, wisdom, and virtue allows them to create a just society. The philosopher-king's role, therefore, is not only to direct the city's laws and policies, but also to cultivate the virtues within the citizens, guiding them toward a life of moral and intellectual fulfillment. A key question that arises at this point is whether such philosopher-kings would even be willing to rule. After all, as Socrates suggests, the philosopher is often uninterested in the material rewards of power and is more focused on the pursuit of knowledge. The idea of governing a city, with all its inherent struggles and challenges, may seem unattractive to someone who seeks peace and wisdom. Socrates acknowledges this, but argues that it is precisely because the philosopher-king understands the nature of justice and virtue that they are uniquely qualified to rule. They will govern not for personal gain, but for the good of the city, ensuring that justice prevails. This brings us to the important question of the role of the citizens in the just city. Socrates makes it clear that the citizens must play their part in upholding justice by fulfilling their respective roles and duties. Each citizen, whether they are a ruler, a soldier, or a worker, has a unique function within the city. For the city to function harmoniously, each citizen must perform their role without overstepping their boundaries. Justice in the city, as in the soul, requires the proper alignment of the different parts, ensuring that no part dominates or interferes with the others. Socrates argues that when each class in the city, rulers, soldiers, and workers, performs its proper function, the city will be just and harmonious. This requires education and the cultivation of virtue in every citizen. The city must promote the development of wisdom, courage, and moderation in all its inhabitants. Only when each individual fulfills their role and contributes to the common good can the city achieve true justice. In conclusion, Socrates asserts that the philosopher-king is the best ruler because of their commitment to wisdom, virtue, and the good of the city. They are not motivated by selfish desires or personal gain, but by a deep understanding of justice and the pursuit of the greater good. The philosopher-king embodies the ideal of the just life, where reason rules, spirit supports, and appetite is kept in check. Through their wisdom and virtue, the philosopher-king ensures that the city remains just and harmonious, providing a model for all citizens to follow. Ultimately, it is through the pursuit of wisdom and justice that the philosopher-king creates a society that reflects the highest ideals of human flourishing. As the dialogue draws to a close, the ultimate question is raised. What does it mean to live a just life, both for the individual and for the city? Throughout the entirety of the Republic, Socrates has explored the nature of justice, the structure of the ideal city, the role of the philosopher-king, and the education required to nurture a virtuous society. In these final moments, the discussions intensify as Socrates seeks to bring the arguments to a meaningful conclusion, grounding the philosophical principles in the practical reality of human existence. The most powerful conclusion to the Republic comes with Socrates' vision of the soul and how it aligns with the life of the philosopher. He reveals his final analogy between the just man and the unjust man. The just person, according to Socrates, lives in harmony with themselves, achieving a balance where reason governs the spirit and the appetites. This harmony ensures that the individual's soul reflects the same justice that the ideal city does. But what happens when the individual chooses the life of injustice? The unjust life, Socrates asserts, leads to a disordered soul, one that is in constant turmoil, torn apart by competing desires and the lack of self-control. While the unjust may seem to succeed in the short term, accumulating wealth or power, the inner chaos of their soul will eventually become apparent, leading to misery and unhappiness. This, for Socrates, is the heart of the argument for justice. It is not merely about external rewards or the respect of others, but the harmony within the soul itself. The just life leads to an internal peace that the unjust life can never hope to attain. Even though those who are unjust may appear to live prosperously by worldly standards, they are in fact enslaved by their own desires. In contrast, the just individual, though they may face hardship or even oppression in the external world, is free in their soul. The true measure of success, then, is not found in material gain, but in the pursuit of wisdom, virtue, and justice. This philosophical insight builds up to Socrates' closing argument, which is encapsulated in his discussion of the myth of The myth is a powerful story that serves as a final illustration of the consequences of living a just life versus an unjust one. The story speaks of a soldier named who, after dying in battle, is sent to the afterlife. In the underworld, he witnesses the fate of souls, seeing both the rewards and punishments that await individuals based on their choices in life. Some souls are rewarded with eternal bliss, while others are condemned to suffer the consequences of their actions. Himself is told that souls who lived just lives are reborn into better circumstances, while the unjust are cast into suffering and degradation. Socrates uses this myth to reinforce the point that justice is not only about the immediate rewards or punishments we experience in this life, but about the eternal consequences for the soul. This myth underlines the philosophical foundation of the Republic, that justice, both in the city and in the soul, is ultimately tied to the well-being of the individual in a cosmic sense. Socrates argues that the just life is the only life worth living, not because it guarantees material wealth or power, but because it leads to true happiness and peace. By contrast, the life of injustice may seem appealing in the short term, but it ultimately leads to a life of internal conflict, misery, and discontent. The dialogue ends with Socrates' assertion that the ideal city, which he has so meticulously constructed in the previous books, is not merely a theoretical exercise. It is a guide for how individuals can live a just life, both within themselves and in their relationships with others. In many ways, the Republic is a work of political philosophy, but it is equally concerned with the moral and spiritual development of the individual. The ideal city is meant to serve as a model for personal virtue, as much as it is meant to represent a blueprint for political harmony. Socrates concludes by urging his interlocutors, and by extension, all of his readers, to pursue the life of wisdom, virtue, and justice. He does not expect anyone to immediately implement the ideal city in the real world, nor does he believe that such a perfect society is attainable in its entirety. However, he encourages everyone to strive toward the realization of justice, both within themselves and in the world around them. The philosopher's role, Socrates suggests, is to lead others toward this pursuit, showing them the path of wisdom and justice, and encouraging them to live lives that align with these eternal truths. The Republic also invites the reader to reflect on the limitations and imperfections of human societies. While Socrates presents the ideal city as a model, he also acknowledges that real-world cities are far from perfect. Human nature, with all its flaws and desires, often complicates the achievement of justice on a large scale. Still, Socrates holds that striving for justice, even in an imperfect world, is essential to both personal fulfillment and societal well-being. The tension between idealism and practicality is at the core of the Republic, and this tension resonates deeply throughout the work. In the final moments of the dialogue, Socrates gives his interlocutors one last opportunity to ask questions or challenge his views. However, none of them speak up, and the conversation comes to an end. The dialogue's final words leave the reader with a sense of the unending quest for justice, the necessity of philosophy, and the enduring importance of the philosopher's role in society. even though the ideal city remains an abstraction. The pursuit of justice within the soul and the city is a goal worth striving for, one that transcends the limitations of the material world and reaches toward the eternal truths that define the nature of justice, virtue, and human flourishing. The final thought, then, is a call to live a just life, not just for the sake of external rewards, but for the peace and harmony it brings to the soul. Socrates leaves us with a vision of the just life as one of inner tranquility, intellectual clarity, and moral integrity. The philosopher-king, who governs with wisdom and virtue, stands as the highest model of what it means to live justly, reminding us all that the pursuit of wisdom and justice is ultimately the pursuit of the good life. In this way, the Republic provides not only a blueprint for political governance, but also a profound meditation on the nature of justice, the soul, and the ideal life. It is a work that continues to resonate through the centuries, challenging readers to examine their own lives and consider how they might live more justly, both as individuals and as citizens of society. As we close our exploration of the Republic, it's clear that Plato's dialogue offers much more than just a political theory. At its heart, it is a profound philosophical treatise on the nature of justice, the human soul, and the ideal life. Socrates, through his rigorous questioning and dialogues with his interlocutors, unfolds a vision of society and the individual that is both idealistic and deeply rooted in ethical considerations. His blueprint for a just city, with its carefully structured divisions of labor and governance, is not just a model for political organization. It is a framework for understanding how we should live, both individually and as a collective. The work's influence extends beyond philosophy, as it continues to be a touchstone in discussions of ethics, politics, education, and even psychology. Plato's conception of the philosopher-king, a ruler who governs not through power but through wisdom and virtue, challenges contemporary views of leadership and governance. It calls into question the way societies are organized, pushing us to consider whether true justice can ever be achieved within the limitations of human nature, or if the pursuit of justice itself is the ultimate goal. The dialogues within the Republic delve deeply into the complexities of human nature. The allegories of the cave and the myth of among others, reveal the tension between appearance and reality, and the philosophical journey from ignorance to knowledge. The allegory of the cave, in particular, remains one of Plato's most famous metaphors for the process of enlightenment. It speaks to the transformative power of education and philosophy, as the journey out of the cave is one of intellectual and spiritual awakening, one that compels the individual to confront the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. In examining the structure of the ideal city, Plato also provides insights into human relationships and the importance of societal roles. He envisions a world where individuals perform tasks according to their natural abilities, where justice is achieved through balance and harmony, rather than through force or inequality. Yet, while this vision is undoubtedly idealistic, it holds an important message for us in the real world. The tension between Plato's utopian vision and the imperfections of the societies we live in is a central theme throughout the dialogue, urging us to strive for the betterment of our own communities and our personal lives, even if we can never achieve the perfection described in the ideal city. In reflecting on the nature of justice, Plato also delves into the relationship between the individual and society. He argues that justice is not just about adhering to laws or receiving rewards and punishments, but about achieving inner harmony and aligning oneself with the greater good. The just individual is one who, through education and self-discipline, achieves the right balance of reason, spirit, and desire. This notion of personal justice speaks to the importance of self-awareness, intellectual integrity, and moral virtue in leading a fulfilling life. The Republic also touches on the role of women, education, art, and the structure of families within the ideal society, demonstrating Plato's attempts to break away from traditional norms. His progressive views on the equality of women in society, for instance, challenge the deeply entrenched gender norms of his time. He proposes that women should be given the same opportunities for education and participation in the city's governance, recognizing their potential to be guardians and leaders just as much as men. Although Plato's vision was radical for his time, it remains relevant today as a reminder of the importance of inclusivity and equality in society. Ultimately, the Republic is a work that encourages readers to think critically about the world around them, to question the nature of justice, and to reflect on how they can live more virtuous, thoughtful, and just lives. The ideal city may never be realized in its entirety, but the principles behind it, wisdom, virtue, and justice, remain essential in the pursuit of human flourishing. In his portrayal of the philosopher-king, Plato gives us the model of the wise ruler, one who governs not out of self-interest, but in service to the greater good. And he challenges us all to embody the same ideals in our own lives, whether we hold political power or not. Socrates' closing arguments resonate deeply, urging us to see justice not merely as a political or legal concept, but as an internal condition of the soul. The just man, he argues, is one who is free from the tyranny of his desires and is in harmony with his own nature. This pursuit of internal justice, while often overlooked in contemporary discourse, is perhaps one of the most valuable aspects of the Republic. In sum, the Republic is not merely a political treatise, but a guide for how we can live better lives. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to seek knowledge, and to align our actions with the pursuit of justice. It calls us to build a society where the common good is prioritized, where wisdom and virtue are cultivated, and where individuals are empowered to live in harmony with their true selves. As we engage with Plato's timeless ideas, we are reminded that the search for truth and justice is not only a philosophical endeavor, but a way of life, a journey that, while difficult, is ultimately the most meaningful and rewarding pursuit we can undertake.